Welcome to the ACS Technical Advisory Board podcast series, where we talk all things tech including data, cyber, AI, blockchain, and Internet of Things. Meet your host, Dr. David Cook, Vice President of the Australian Computer Society's Technical Boards. David is a technology advocate dedicated to advances and progression of computing and human-computer interaction. In this episode, David will be talking with Dr. Asif Gill on the topic of enterprise architecture, its role in a modern and ever-changing tech landscape, and the value it can bring to organizations.
Asif Gill is what we call a pracademic. That is to say, that he's both an academic and a practitioner. With more than 20 years in the business and being a highly respected voice in discussions about enterprise architecture, he is a valued member of the ACS Technical Committee. Asif, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with a hard question. Tell us about the role of enterprise architecture in the current context, that is in terms of data, in terms of all things digital and in terms of AI. Where does it sit? What's it about?
Very interesting question, very timely in a way. We are all swamped by this digital data and AI, and we hear every now here and there, a conference or a business. So really, first we define what is a digital data and AI. So it's about a fundamental change. So when you're looking at digital data and AI adoption in an organization, we're looking at the change. And there's nothing better than enterprise architecture discipline to handle the change, identify the change, identify the impact of that change, digital data and AI in the enterprise environment, and being able to inform us how we handle that change. I would say that the approaches we have followed in digital data and AI. Let's start with the AI from the top end, because we talk about data AI. When I say AI, it includes also GAI as well, generative AI for the audience, for sake. We have driven through the algorithms or application-driven approach and adopting kind of piecemeal approach to handle or adopt AI or GAI. So where the enterprise architecture is all about a holistic approach. But having said that, it does not mean we have to wait for 6 months, a year to develop those AI or digital roadmaps. How we can quickly be more agile and adaptive in enterprise architecture to address the change and have a more coordinated approach to digital data and AI in the organization. So that's where I see the role of digital data and AI to, rather than a piecemeal approach, more coordinated and integrated approach. Because behind the scene, if you're going further behind digital data and AI, it's all about integrating data, connecting data, digital twin of the enterprise itself, and then make it ready for AI. So I would say a lot of digital transformations, with some time, they look from a marketing point of view, sometimes they look at the customer experience, and sometimes they're looking at AI from piecemeal approach, certain places where they can embed AI algorithm or test or all these things. But the foundation of everything is that, I believe so, as data fabric. If that's not solid, or data foundation, we call it now, that probably we're really looking at a risky approach to digital data and AI. And enterprise architecture is there to help with that, to understand the holistic view and look at the impact of those technologies and risk around that.
So you hold a very optimistic view about the role of enterprise architecture, but not everyone shares your view. And I guess I wonder if you could touch on what are the hard things, what are the challenges for EI in the evolving, in a 2023 format? What are they?
That's very, very, I think, interesting question, because people always talk about EA and how does it add value. It's a long-term planning, or is it 3 years, 5 years? How would it will quickly respond to the opportunity presented to us in terms of digital data and AI? So I look at that EA discipline itself needs to change. We have a lot of architect evolved from 90s, and then the dot-com boom came into play. We all know that, web development, mobile, cloud computing. So really, I would believe the challenge with EA itself is that the way we practice, we're really heavily documentation driven rather than outcome driven. So the first thing is that, what's really an outcome we needed to achieve? And it's not about generating models. That's where the architecture is being probably maybe criticized. It's about providing that important critical information to make decisions to drive those outcomes. So my second thing is that it should be outcome driven, but also should be decision driven as well. In order to feed those decisions, EA should be able to agile and adaptive enough to provide that timely information to the decision maker to make the change. So I would say that documentation too is more about a decision-driven, outcome-driven approach to EA.
When people talk about the digital economy and they talk about the way in which data and AI are making changes, I guess some people talk about it in a sort of a foreboding sense, and other people are, as I've pointed out, a bit more optimistic. What do you see in terms of how can AI in particular, but more perhaps just in general data, how can that augment the usefulness, I suppose, of an EA position?
That's actually a double loop, which you probably referring to, that EA for enabling the adoption of digital data and AI, and how AI itself or data can help the EA itself as well. So data and AI and digitalization can also augment the way we practice EA. So we should move away from a model developing approach to enterprise architecture, information management. And that's where the data comes into play. So not about modeling, it's about managing the EA. And the managing the EA, it means considering enterprise architecture as information or a data, which data can be turned into analytics using analytics technologies or using other information technologies. And that those analytics can further be augmented through AI to being able to provide us some decision making around there, some pattern matching around there in EA practice itself. So I believe there's an opportunity for EA practice as well as a whole or a discipline to reimagine them in a way they can apply digital data and AI technology. And then they can harness that and modernize the EA practice itself. But while modernizing the EA practice using these technologies, we also keep in mind that next generation of enterprise architects, they need to be more data savvy. They should be able to deal with AI and analytics technologies. So architecture, analytics, and architecture and AI and architecture and data, people have both skills around there. So AI, data, and digitalization needs to bring all the data across the organization, not through a documentation for over a period of months and months, but as a part of the continuous architecture, continuous monitoring. And now we are actually, I think, mature enough in terms of enterprise architecture tooling or tool pipelines or ecosystem. We have such tools which we didn't have available previously, which we can make use of them. I wouldn't specifically pick up one tool, but there are technology available now. You can scan and monitoring the enterprise architecture environment. You collect that data continuously basis and being able to process that data for real-time decision making or decision when you need it to make.
So one of the buzzwords, I suppose, or buzz phrases that's floating around is this notion of data-driven economy and a data-driven strategy. So I wonder if you could give us your thoughts. If we're talking at the high-level end, if you're giving high-level strategic advice about emerging changes for EA, how important is it that that becomes a data-driven strategy, and what are the pitfalls of those people who don't follow a data-driven pathway?
I start with the last one first, the pitfalls. I think if there is no evidence, if just intuition, then I think we're missing the part of it. So really the pitfall is that you're missing the evidence if you're not having a data-driven approach to strategy. Or the policy, if you look at the further higher level up, evidence policy, there's a whole lot of work has been going into play for a long time. So the pitfall is that we're missing the evidence or we're ignoring the evidence. So I'm not saying that only the data is important or evidence is important, but also the intuition, the creativity. And also sometimes we do not have enough data, which we call a bounded rationale in economic world or economics. So we live with the data we have. And depending on how much cost we're going to spend on that, collecting that evidence for policy or strategy. So make some trades off around there. So the starting point, yes, data has a part to play in data-driven strategy or evidence-based strategy, but also there's a cost of collecting the data or that evidence and process and feed upstream. And I would like to highlight the role of enterprise architecture in that. Enterprise architecture or data-driven enterprise architecture can provide such an evidence across the organization, which that data or evidence can feed upstream into the strategy as well to provide that data-driven approach to developing the strategy. And at the same time, downstream as well, for operations. We always forget about the operations as well. Strategy is as good as it goes into the operations. Otherwise, it's sitting there in the paperwork or PowerPoint, as we know that. It's not been actioned. So strategy to all the way to the implementation or operations. Architecture could be a glue in both ways, and then move into the operations. So, but the question is that the cost of collecting the data. So we have now automation around there. So I would say the architecture automation, operation automation can provide that data rather than manually collecting through hundreds of those workshops and then try to validate what you collected now, what people think is the data. But really, operations is a reality. And I call operations is kind of a way to the continuous architecture. Operations are the architecture. It's a matter of time or matter for us to be able to get that data, scan it, analyze it, and feed upstream to data-driven strategy.
Asif Gill, thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
To find out more about how the ACS is powering Australia's technology brilliance, visit us at our website, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Want to get involved with the ACS technical boards? Email us at tab@acs.org.au and tell us a bit about yourself. Join us for more thought leadership, ideas, and information through our other podcasts on the ACS YouTube, Facebook, or on LinkedIn.